we go. Well, welcome everybody. So we'll do intros just in a second, but we always like to start with the if I had known that revenue really is a factory when I was a CEO, I think I would have done a lot better. So what if revenue creation is a factory? But wait, if that is the case, then I will argue in the next 60 minutes that we are running a no Sigma factory. That's not very good, but we could be running a Six Sigma factory. And the impact office could help with that. What the hell is the impact office? Well, it's the function in your company that owns this continuous revenue improvement process. So there you have it. This is what we'll be covering in the next 60 minutes. We'll do that by first talking about why does this matter right now? Why revenue productivity? Why take an hour out of your day to learn about that? Then we'll talk about the revenue factory and specifically the impact office, that function that could continuously improve revenue, which will all sound pretty straightforward until we get to real life, which is number 4 there. Like, yep, it's actually a pretty easy concept. It's pretty logical, but in real life, we're dealing with humans, not just bots, actual humans, and change management can be hard. So we'll probably have a bit of a discussion around that, what could go wrong and what you could do about that, and then we'll wrap it up with Q&A. That being said, would love to make this interactive. I know many of you are not turning on your cameras, which, except for Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. So we'd love to see your lovely faces, but if not your faces, at least interact with you on chat. So let's start with figuring out who actually is on this live session. So if you could type into chat, what is your role, function, title, in your company, and we'll later explain why I'm asking that question specifically. But let's see, CRO, sales ops, sales enablement, CRO, revenue, sales enablement, AE. Yep. Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, so pretty good mix of go-to-market functions on the revenue side. So both the people accountable for the number as well as those supporting that from an enablement and an ops perspective. We're going to talk about all those roles as well as a new role which we see emerging, which is the VP of go-to-market strategy. So I don't think we have any of those on this call, right? Like anyone there who carries that as a primary or secondary title? No. We have a lot of them on our customer advisory board. So I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Yeah, customer success. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Jonathan, love to maybe circle back with you later on this whole idea of go-to-market strategy. Really becoming very important. But let's figure out why. So this why is this so important? We've posted about this on LinkedIn. Started actually focusing, us and the rest of the world on it's no longer about growth at all costs. Some of my customers say, what, you're still questioning that? No, that's dead. Like, growth at all costs is dead. We need to grow efficiently. We need to grow sustainably. Yes, and more. We'll get to that cliffhanger. However, even though for the last at least 6 months, if not more, 12, 18 months, we've been saying, as valuations came down and money was harder to come by, that we have to increase our revenue efficiency. We actually haven't collectively as a market. This is data that's published by David Spitz, one of our partners over at Benchside. But yeah, cost of sales and marketing is based on public SaaS company data. But in private companies, unfortunately, it's not much better. Overall sales and marketing as percentage of total revenue is relatively flat, but as percentage of net new ARR, it is getting worse, meaning we're getting less efficient. Now, part of that, of course, is because growth rates have come down quite a bit, but costs have not come down commensurately, and arguably they were already too high. So that is reason number 1 why focus on revenue productivity right now. The second reason is, and I think probably you're sensing this in your companies as well, But we have a lot of people not hitting quota. Basically, we're dividing the world here in 3 groups. Those bottom performers are people that do not just miss quota, but do less than 50% of quota. That group used to be about 10%. We're seeing it sit at about 28% right now. And then you add to that the people who do less than 80% of quota, which are underperformers in our definition. We're now up to 68% of folks really not pulling their weight in the company. And so it's another way of looking at this problem of efficient or sustainable growth. So these are 2 reasons why many of our clients are currently asking us, so how do we tackle this? Dominique, please give me the silver bullet. Spoiler alert, there is no silver bullet, but there is a solution, which we will discuss today. All right, so the revenue factory. What if revenue were a factory? What if revenue were a factory that is run by the go-to-market team? First of all, revenue, again, is a go-to-market problem. It's not a sales problem. It's not a marketing problem. It's not a customer success problem. At least we have CS and sales leaders on this call, no marketing leaders, but it's really all of your go-to-market leaders working together to create revenue. Collectively, we're not doing that great of a job at that. As I alluded to, we're basically running at no sigma right now. If you take the average sort of lead to close conversion, we're probably sitting at, well, 2%. I'm being generous here. I think for many of you, it might be 1%, right? If you compound lead to qualified lead to opportunity to close, etc. A marketing leader. Fantastic. Fantastic. We have the full go-to-market team. We can solve all the problems in go-to-market today. But yeah, so only 2% of leads turn into deals. That is pretty bad, people. Think about the waste, or think about the opportunity that there is to optimize that. So there's a lot between No Sigma and Six Sigma, and it will take us a long time to get there, but we can. There's a lot of money right there. So as I alluded to so far, growth at all costs. Scaling was, the name of the game. I've been in board meetings where board members ask their VP sales, can you grow faster? If I give you more money, will you grow faster? There really was literally no mention of efficiency or unit economics or all that. That has changed. So lots of talk right now on efficient or sustainable growth. But I'm here to argue that that is necessary, but not sufficient. So this third thing, if this were a factory, right, we would worry about output of the factory, we'd worry about the cost of the factory, but we also would worry about the quality of the output. Because if we produce crappy products, no one is going to buy from us in the future. And that is especially true in recurring revenue as well, right? So quality in our world is customer impact. But really, when we say we want to optimize revenue, right, we're really talking about optimizing all 3 of these, or one at a time, as we will see later. But we're looking to continue to grow. We're looking to do that efficiently, and we're looking to ensure that we create customer impact, because if not, then that virtuous loop of revenue will come to an end. But yes, if revenue were a factory, we could optimize it like any other process. There is input, output, throughput. What does this remind you of? Like what other process industries do we know that might have developed some methodologies we could learn from? Let's put that manufacturing, yes. Other than manufacturing, are there other process industries that, or other processes in your company that maybe peers in other functions that have optimization methodologies or iterative? What about development? How did we run development, like product development, like 20 years ago? What did we use for that? Software R&D. Yeah. What was the name of the game in product land? Waterfalls. Okay, what do we do today? Today we do lean, we do incremental, right? So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but basically, if we collectively believe that creating revenue is an end-to-end process, then we can optimize it just like a manufacturing process or a product development queue or any other process. So that's what we're going to talk about. Like, how do you do that? Again, simple concept, a little harder in real life. Of course, it starts with defining your process. For this, we're going to use the bow tie. The bow tie is a great representation of an end-to-end impact journey, right? Like, how do we get customers to impact? First principle of recurring revenue is that recurring revenue comes from recurring impact. That's that quality element in the factory. But we can now define what that journey looks like from beginning to end, right? From awareness to growth and expansion. What is the stage to stage conversion rate? What is it? How long does it take from stage to stage? And those are all things that we could optimize. So I always like to ask this what if question. What if we could find 5 opportunities throughout the customer journey to make a relatively small incremental improvement? And I picked 15% here. Again, I'm not talking about 15 points, but I'm talking about taking a close rate maybe from 20% to 23%, right? Like, or a discount rate from 20% to 17%, or maybe we do, slightly faster onboarding. We do onboarding not in 20 days, but in 17 days. And so we improve the throughput of getting clients to first impact, etc. Now, if I do that 5 times, I need to go really quick there because I have the answer on the slide. All right, I took that down, but maybe some of you saw it. Charlie, you probably know the answer. Don't give it away. But if I do 5 incremental improvements of 15%, how much revenue impact does that have? So the math formula, it was on the slide, which is why I had to take it down real quick. But the math formula is 1.15, right, to the power of 5. I don't know if anyone has a fancy Apple iPhone calculator or something like that. You can punch that in. But yeah, the math here is we do compound impact, right? Because if I do 15% more leads to opportunities, now I have more opportunities. If I make more opportunities to deals, etc., all of that compounds, which is something that's a little hard for us to. Ben has it has 2 times impact. That's right. So we've just doubled our revenue without adding a single lead or a single salesperson, which is something your CFO will appreciate. Right. So again, as I said in the beginning, there is no silver bullet. But this idea that you change one thing at a time and that you can actually move faster and have a bigger impact is pretty foundational. And I thought, again, being an engineer by training, like, all right, any executive will get this, and they get it, but still there's lots of CROs and CEOs out there that say, yeah, I get it, but can we just all do all 5 things at the same time? Why is that a bad idea, by the way? Like, why is the bad idea to change? Let's say I have identified these 5 things that I could change. Why is it a bad idea to change 5 things at the same time?
We won't be able to make any of the changes stick if you're trying to do all 5 at once.
Yeah, it's much harder to make it stick. What else? Can't isolate what's not working, right? The feedback loop, can't do everything well. There's actually a lot of science around this. And here, I'll put it on the screen. We'll give you this too. If you need help convincing your board maybe of why this is a bad idea. The left-hand column are some things that come from learning science, behavioral science and such, right? Like, how do people, many of these changes will require behavior change, right? Yes, we may get to a point that the bots are running our sales process, but right now it's still human beings interacting with human beings on the part of the client. And if you want to have behavior change, you will move faster if you change one thing at a time. So there's a lot of evidence around that. On the right-hand side, we see indeed some things that come more from that manufacturing, Kaizen, Six Sigma world, right? Where if you want to create a culture of continuous learning and adaptation and isolate what's working and what's not and make it stick, then you're better off changing one thing at a time. So we have both scientific and some case study data on this that, but again, one of those things that it's not so obvious. Like if you want to implement this revenue factory idea, one of the first things you have to contend with is you have to get to this bow tie mindset. What is the bow tie mindset? The bow tie mindset is we're talking not about a sales problem. We're not talking about a marketing problem. We're going to bust the silos. And this is an end-to-end marketing, sales, customer success, and everything in between problem, right? So that's foundational, but I noticed, before you can change behavior, you need to change a mindset, and that's mindset one. Mindset two is this idea that we're going to change one thing at a time. And if you can't get buy-in on that concept at the high level, it's going to be difficult to implement any of these ideas. So let's get to the meat and potatoes, I guess the specifics that we had promised to talk about, which is this idea of an impact office. So like I said before, what is an impact office? An impact office is really the function within your organization which owns the continuous incremental, one thing at a time, revenue improvement process. Again, revenue, right? Could be initiatives, improvement initiatives related to, well, it's almost like a 2x2 matrix here, right? It's related to growth, cost, or quality / impact. It could be initiatives related to marketing, sales, customer success, and/or all of these above. But if you look at foundational principles in Kaizen, Six Sigma, etc., it really is define your process, then measure it. So the first thing that this overarching go-to-market centralized function, again, I'm saying deliberately function, right? It doesn't have to be, it's a role. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. It could be a part-time job, a +1 job. It could be a committee, a tiger team, a SWAT team, what have you. We'll get back to that. But there has to be a function. If you want to have a chance at improving this overall revenue factory, you will have to create a central function that busts silos and that agrees on the data. Someone in the chat mentioned that, right? Like, not everyone even has the data or agrees on the data, but if you can't agree on definitions, it's going to be very difficult to make progress and to make improvement. So the first job of this function / role, which again could be a person or people, usually people, a committee, is to create the dashboards and the key metrics that define your revenue process. And we saw, again, we recommend, that you look at the bow tie, not just as a good visual representation of getting customers to impact, like a customer journey picture, but also as a data model. And you see already here, right, like once you have defined and make sure that all the departments in your organization agree on definitions of lead, opportunity, deal, etc., you can start to measure both conversion rate and throughput time and incrementally improve that. So volume metrics, conversion metrics, and stage-to-stage time. Again, we just launched last week a new consortium, go-to-market consortium, to hopefully advocate that more companies use not just the same definition inside that company, but also across companies, because that creates an amazing opportunity to benchmark. If I have time, I might demo you bench sites. Has anyone seen bench sites? Let's type in the chat. Did anyone see the initiative we have with bench sites?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that's only possible if we have. So what we're talking about there is industry benchmarks, right? Like comparing yourself against other companies like you. But that only has meaning if we have the same definition of data, which is something we're really, I guess, trying to help the industry with right now. But yeah, so step one of this function is agreeing on the data. Step two is actually meeting regularly. I can't tell you how often I meet clients where when we get engaged, we bring the different go-to-market functions in one room, sometimes for the first time ever. Think about that. That's kind of nutty, right? But I guess it's sort of evolution. We all decentralize and we centralize. I'm not saying centralize, but coordinate between the go-to-market functions. So regular cadence of meetings is what this function owns, bringing people together to talk about common definition of data, and then agree on the roadmap of sprints. Someone mentioned that word already. We'll go into a little more detail, but basically the roadmap of the revenue, productivity, and others, right? Growth, quality improvement initiatives. So those are the three functions of this impact office function that we're advocating you create. Okay, I'll go back to those other slides. But I thought I would share some data and then we'll maybe turn it to people on the phone and see what your experiences are and where people are on this journey. But we have a customer advisory board. I mentioned, well, actually two of them. One's focused more on enablement leaders. The other is focused more on these go-to-market strategy. It's a group of about 20 of them that get together regularly. Again, we did a small survey to see, well, this new function that's emerging to really, coordinate much of what we're talking about today, get a little bit of a sense of the shape of that. So about half of them report to the CRO or the VP sales, but about half of them report elsewhere, which is kind of interesting. I don't know that there is a right or wrong, but right, you could make this function or the role of the CRO encompassing of all of go-to-market, or it could be a CEO or delegate of the CEO responsibility. So I think that sort of 50-50 response is, I think, where the industry is on that right now. We also talked a little bit about, what is this role, right? Now we're talking about, or a function responsible for beyond this idea of the impact office. So here you see some of the things that people have on their plate in that role. So definitely go-to-market strategy and planning, mostly RevOps, right? And all the BI and analytics and reporting that goes with that. Enablement, standardizing sales process and sales compensation. And then, this cross-functional alignment, this busting of the silos, right, that we're talking about. So I would say, yeah, your peers, I don't know the exact statistics. I'd actually try and love, maybe 1 out of 20 in SaaS currently has this role, something like that. But yeah, definitely something to consider, really dedicating a person, whether it's part-time or full-time, to have this coordinating role inside your organization. Claire, are you willing to share a little bit about the GTM squad? How did that work in your previous company?
Yeah, so I was brought in as the go-to-market strategist with the kind of intention of what you're talking about here, with just trying to get alignment across the full of the revenue funnel. And we came up with the idea of a go-to-market squad that would have kind of a senior management team level, so they could take some of the pressure away from the C-suite. So kind of VP level across the company, from marketing through to customer experience, and we would be kind of we'd be designated into different sections. So the strategy team and the marketing team would be very much focused kind of externally and having a look at what signals were coming into the company and what kind of industry shifts and changes are taking place. And then we'd have kind of like the marketing to sales handover, sales to handover to account management function, looking at the data from within that section of the company, and then having a look at kind of like the wraparound to the voice of the customer piece then from the account management perspective feeding through across to everything else. It was early stages, because it's, as you're saying, it's a lot to take on, and doing one thing at a time was probably what we should have done. But yeah, that was the idea, so that we had that full visibility of kind of future vision as well as what was taking place inside the company at the same time.
That's great. And you mentioned that maybe one of the challenges you faced was that you're trying to take on too much. Any other challenges that you faced that were particularly difficult at that time?
Culturally, I think there's a lot of friction inside the company. We had a chief customer officer and a chief revenue officer and a newly appointed chief marketing officer, who all had different visions of what they wanted and how that should take place. And there was a lot of history within the company that required a lot of trust, kind of taking the next steps forward and perhaps trying things that had already been done, but with a different team, with a different structure in a different way, trying to get a better outcome.
Great. Alex, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, it's I guess it's more of a question, to be honest, from my end, like, because I see this list of items and for me, to be honest, these are like massive, like I honestly can't really and maybe if you can clarify in general how much of a team is that, is it like the whole like dozens of people or something, because we like you're leading to it now, right? So because my question here specifically, maybe to the previous slide, is that I see specifically, let's say the BI kind of functions and let's say compensation, all this kind of things, to be relatively kind of low impact. I don't see them kind of adding value necessarily, like to the revenue factory, right, that you were describing. But let's say on the enablement side, on the GTM side, this is exactly what let's say the field needs to improve the efficiency, right? So I wonder if you have some sort of maybe insight on that, kind of separating purely accounting things, like operational things, from actually more of a creative things, right? Because I think this is what you need to create the impact, right? Like in the first place.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is that this role, I said it's called go-to-market strategy, but actually most people in this role have the title of go-to-market strategy and operations. And I think you need both, right? So if you look at this list of responsibilities, right, the strategy piece is sort of 1 and 6, I guess, right? Like 1 and 6 are about setting that roadmap and what are we going to change and in what order and what's the impact. But then as they taught me in business school, sometimes it's 10% strategy and 90% execution, actually following through, right, and making sure that those productivity enhancements actually stick does require a lot of tactical stuff, right? It requires measuring not just lagging indicators, but leading indicators, which we'll talk about in a second. It requires enablement, training, creation of new messaging, sometimes coaching, which might require a coaching culture. Anyway, so there's a lot of work. But to your point, I was somewhat shocked to learn that some of these people do have big teams. And again, this is the tip of the spear, but I thought it'd be useful and maybe helpful for you in your negotiation with your board and management, right? To realize that I think many leading edge, right? So think about our customer base, right? So we have the likes of like DocuSign and Dropbox and like, I don't know, whatever, HashiCorp and Sneak and some of these, more GitLab, right? Like modern, but I would say cutting edge-ish, right? Companies that are making huge investments. And I think there is a sense in the industry, Jacco talks about this a lot, on how the next wave of winners or differentiators will come on how good you're executing go-to-market. And people are making real investments there. So I have very limited data on this, but we're in the process of collecting more. So I was indeed going to ask maybe if people can in the chat help us with Alex's question as well, right? Like one way to look at it, I think, is what is the ratio? And I separate it here in 2, right? Like sort of enablement and training in one bucket, and then revenue operations and business analytics in another bucket. This may not be granular enough, to your point, Alex, because again, the numbers came out very big, right? Initially, you see here, I do it again as a percentage or as a ratio of sellers. So we see 1 to 20. So for every 20 sellers, 1 enablement or training person, and 1 on 6 for RevOps and business analytics, which includes, I think, a lot of those comp and maybe even non-sales analytics functions, which of course, especially once you become a public company, you will have many more of those, right? Financial planning, analysis, forecasting. So I think we need to be more granular than this, but at least it will give us a starting point. But yeah, if anybody, I don't know if anybody has this, see some people willing to share after. I have a link to, maybe, sorry, we can post that link. So if anyone does know what their ratio is, let's start with enablement, like enablement to sellers. Anyone know what their ratio is? Sellers, yeah, sellers are, I think this is all people in a sales function, you know, sort of left side of both sides. So yes, SDRs and such. And then customer success includes account management. So we say sort of right side of both sides. But yeah, maybe we'll post that link to at least the initial survey, but I also have a feeling I may need to redo this even more granular to get a good sense of where things are. But this could be, to your point, I think, Alex, a pretty big area of investment if you truly want to do it. But it has huge payoff, right? We just already talked about potentially doubling revenue in a very cost-effective way. So clearly, you know, it's a worthwhile investment. 1 to 16, yeah. Anyway, keep sharing on the chat, and again, let's help each other. We'll do another follow-on survey and then send that out as well. Oh, I skipped some things. Let's go back to this impact office, because I do agree with this sentiment also that I think many of these teams, even if they're big, are way too tactical and not strategic enough. And that's where I think both the factory paradigm and the bow tie paradigm, I guess, really can help, right? And creating that systematic one at a time. So again, my recommendation would be, if you're in a role, even informally, like this, that you, even though it might be 90% execution, 10% strategy, you do need to start with the strategy. And the strategy does not have to be perfect, but you know, you need to, you can't manage what you can't measure. I don't know, there's many of these quotes out there, right? You need to have a thesis, like you need to have, you know, a thesis of what you think will happen and what you're looking to improve, and see if that's actually working or not. So you need to close that loop, right? It's a closed loop system. So again, we recommend that you step 1, measure, you know, this bow tie like we had here, right? Then find areas of improvement, but don't get too carried away with finding the absolute best thing to improve first. I think as Winning by Design, even we made that mistake. I don't know if anyone here has gone through a go-to-market diagnostic with Winning by Design, but especially some years ago, they would be 100-page reports, and we would try to be absolutely mathematically accurate in making a recommendation what the first thing to improve should be. But sometimes, you know, your board is on your case because your discount rate is too high, or your board is on your case because your expansion rate has dropped. And for whatever reason, right, it is politically expedient to focus on that particular thing first. So since you're going to do one thing at a time, it does make sense to look at data and to try and find that, you know, sequence of things that you're going to focus on. And again, when I say data, you can compare yourself against yourself, right? Like maybe you compare your European team to your US team, and there's, you know, close rate in the US much lower than in Europe. Okay, that could be an opportunity. Maybe you can even learn from the European team, right? Maybe you have a difference between your SMB team and your enterprise team, or maybe 3 quarters ago, well, that gets tricky because the world has changed a lot. Okay, 2 quarters ago, right, your expansion rate was X, and now it's only half of that, right? Those are areas of, because you see change or difference, you can also look again at industry benchmarks. So there we mentioned bench sites. Highly recommend you check that out, which is our industry benchmarking initiative against the bow tie, where you can filter, I'll see if I can demo in a second. You can filter pretty granularly, companies that are just like you, same size, same maybe deal size, etc. So that's step one, right? Like figure out where to focus. And then this talks a little bit about if you wanted to establish this impact office, how would you go about it, right? So first you have to, so 3 things again to agree on would be who's on that committee, who's on that go-to-market squad. Love that term. That could be another one. We have revenue council. Anyway, people use different terms for this thing. So agree who's on it and how you're going to measure things. Then agree on a cadence to meet and just get into the habit of, I would recommend monthly. Some people do it quarterly, but especially if you're trying to convince people of one thing at a time, it helps to try and run small but rapid sprints, right? So the sprint is a full quarter. Again, for a public company, maybe that's okay to see results within the quarter, but you can run it, as quick as, every month, and then iterate on that, adjust, iterate, pick the next thing. We'll talk about that in a second. And then again, this third step in this process is just actually defining the sprint. So let's talk about that a little bit. We've used this word sprint now a lot, but what really is a sprint? So this is a 6-week cadence. Again, depends on the size of your organization and how quickly you can align people. You can definitely compress that, more. But as outlined here, sort of middle of the road would be 1 week to agree as a team, what metric are we going to improve? Let's say we're going to improve, I don't know, close rates. Okay, great. Like then we need to take that one step lower and decide what is the skill, because there's probably 20 things that could impact close rate. One of those might be doing better diagnosis of the impact that you can have on your customer, less feature function selling and more sort of impact diagnosis and questioning during the discovery call, which will have an impact downstream on close rate. Okay, so let's say that that's what we're going to do. Now we have to agree to maybe do some work with marketing to find what are those common questions that we could ask by persona to uncover impact. That's what step 2 is, right? That's what we mean by design. We're not talking about designing your whole bow tie or your whole customer journey. We're just talking about, can we design that one thing that we're looking to improve? Close rate leads to maybe asking more impact questions. Okay, great. Now we need to teach the team. So we're going to leverage enablement to roll that out. We recommend, again, a single training session. So this will give you a sense also on how small your change needs to be. In one 90-minute session, you should be able to train the team on the core skill you're going to focus on in this sprint. So in our example, it's impact questions. Okay, great. Now most people stop there. It's like, okay, we're done. No, you've actually not started. And in fact, that's where the work really starts. Now you need to coach against that for several weeks in a row. And I would say at least 3 might take longer. As your team gets better at this, it will go better. But we're now going to apply that skill to real life situations. So call recordings are great. Deal reviews are great. And for this, you need your frontline managers, right? Without the frontline managers leaning in on this and making sure that whenever they have a one-on-one, whenever they have a team meeting, they're coming back to this topic. In our example, impact questions, right? Do we know what the likely impact is for this client? Like, what questions did you ask? Let's listen to the recording. And, that's, again, learning science 101, right? 70% of the change comes from practice, just by doing and applying. And since human beings are not always good at change, we just have to force people to try. And as they try, they will get better. Any questions? Let me pause there. Any questions on this idea of, because we've covered quite a bit now, right? We've covered this idea of an impact office, which is going to focus on that unified metrics dashboard, cadence of meetings to define a roadmap of sprints. I know we just went through an example of what a sprint is, picking a key metric, picking a key skill. You also need to pick, again, a lagging and leading indicator. Close rate is lagging. Leading indicator might be how many impact questions do people ask. You could set up a tracker, maybe if you use Gong or Chorus or whatever to track that. And then working with your managers to make sure people practice and apply this to real deals and to real calls and conversations. If you do that, I predict that, again, you will see impact questions asked go up and first, and then, depending on what your sales cycle is, right, close rate go up next. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, I'm just kind of, I guess, hoping for you to give some insight. If you know kind of companies running it, because running this sort of sales sprints has been like a few years back. We kind of tried doing it, and what we realized is that the sales motion is very similar. It has a lot of kind of things that you have to expedite, right? Whatever sprint plan you built, it has a tendency to be like, if you start with a sprint plan on Monday, by Friday you already have so many things to say that are probably coming down from the C-level that you need to expedite, that your let's say sprint plan kind of goes down the drain to a certain extent. So it was more like Kanban in that sense, right? You always sort of need to be kind of flexible, and that's my main kind of thing here, because I'm like, one thing I'm trying to understand, what should be like the minimal size of the team to be able to run this, and maybe also the ARR kind of band in a sense, because I can definitely see that, being applicable for big companies, right? But I'm just curious from your end, what's the sweet spot in a sense, right? Like to run this kind of things efficiently from the team size perspective, and I'm talking about the seller kind of team, but the individual contributor team, and from the ARR band maybe. Just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, in general, we feel that once you hit 10 million in revenue, maybe 20 sellers or so, you should run like a revenue factory, and you can start with this, and you don't. Right, so that's in terms of the seller team. Before then, you're more in founder selling mode still, and it's not so much about optimization. But as soon as you saw that ratio also, right? Like 20-1 is sort of where people came out in terms of dedicating a person to. Right, it comes a person. I've even seen companies do it sooner, and I think more and more companies are realizing, wait. Depends on how much productivity enhancement you think you can get, right? If you think that you can get 20% productivity enhancement, then as soon as you have 5 people, it's better to invest in one person focusing on improving the productivity of those 5 rather than hiring the 6th rep, right? So it could start very young, but again, as a sort of rough, we say 10 million or 20 sellers, and yeah, from a enablement and so I emphasize this is a function or a role. It doesn't have to be a full-time job, right? It could be a +1 job for one or multiple people. We sometimes find that you might have a very talented and ambitious salesperson or SDR, or right, you can take people that want to move up and that have good ideas and that are successful in their job and make it an honorable position to be part of the go-to-market squad when you're smaller. So I don't think you have to be very big to get this started. I do believe you made another point, which is very true, which is, and Claire is also alluding to that, I think, in the chat, right? Like the one thing at a time is really difficult. And I always like I don't know if you know this book, Getting Things Done. It recommends that you make an end goal for yourself and the immediate next step to get there. Don't spend too much time on the roadmap, because the roadmap will change, right? So maybe you do have some sort of a pro forma of what the next 3 sprints will be. Let's say you run 1 a month, and so you have the next quarter planned out. But you're right, it's going to change quite a bit. and you do have to be agile, but you need to get into a mode, but you do need to prepare these things, right? Materials, training, coaching, and so forth. So there's some sort of a queue, couple months out for sure. And then Claire's question, does that answer your question, first of all? Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So Claire's asking, like, how do you know it's time to move on to the next sprint? Well, I made a point of leading indicators, and maybe we didn't emphasize that enough in the slides, so I just want to pause on that. So lagging indicator was win rate. Anyone remember what did I say was the leading indicator for win rate in our example? What did we say? Or what could be a leading indicator? Maybe you can make stuff up too, right? Like what would be a leading indicator before you see win rates move? What do you see move? Impact questions, yeah. So that was our example, but it could be something else too. It could be storytelling, like people telling more effective customer stories, or it could be talking to the right person. So maybe you're identifying that your close rate is low, or you're hypothesizing your close rate is low because you're talking to individual contributors, and you really should be talking to executives. So then you can measure week over week, are we starting to talk to more executives, right? So whatever the leading indicator is, as soon as you see that move, you can move on to the next thing, right? If it doesn't move, you need to ask yourself, wait, was my thesis wrong, or is the way we're executing it wrong, right? And that's, again, where the go-to-market squad, the revenue, the impact office team will have to get together and decide, like, all right, like, what are we going to do about this? Is it time to move on? Charlie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just I wanted to try and answer Alex and Claire's questions. So I was at Anaplan, and probably from and it was a larger company, from about 200 to 300 million in ARR. I was driving the go-to-market initiatives, and I think to be able to do this, Alex, you'll need to really dedicate some project management, program management capacity. And from my perspective, we had a new CRO, and we had to identify, we had like 40 go-to-market initiatives, and so we said, let's understand what they are and then prioritize those. So we got those down to about 8 or 9, and then I was almost driving a PMO to really understand the status of those, help those leaders driving each of the initiatives, from the partner program to a pod enablement, to a pipeline metrics and data analytics, to sales methodology and account planning. So I would work with those business leaders to build plans, and then help manage those plans and roll that up. But we were able to, the way we held ourselves accountable is that we'd report out monthly, but then we also had a quarterly meeting where we built a steering committee that was chaired by the CEO, and then we had a few other executive team members on there that we reported out on. So, being able to engineer some level of program management, some sponsorship at the executive level, and some accountability stakes in the ground, whether it's monthly or quarterly, was really helped us to drive that execution. I think in a small company, from even 10 million ARR, you develop a coalition of the willing with someone, whether it's in rev ops or marketing ops, or one of the leaders that is can work across teams and be able to drive some of these initiatives that are most important. And then you can leverage the bow tie to be able to see, where do we want to focus? What's most important? Is it CR5? Is it CR2? Is it, do we understand the definitions of impact as we go across the revenue journey? And you can just, define what those objectives are, and then really understand, how we make progress against those, and then lead really mini projects to try and finish those. And then, Claire, to your question, you are able to move on to the next one once you finish the first few, and it'll continue to change. The battle plan is only good until the first shot. But yeah, I think just kind of my theme, and that I would recommend is, build a team, a cross-functional team, coalition of the willing. You don't have to have direct authority, and hold yourselves accountable through the executive team.
Yeah. Ben, do you have a question? Thank you, Charlie. That's great.
Yeah, and this might be teeing you up for the next agenda item. But looking at from the impact office and looking at what sprint you're going to choose, it looks like depending on what lagging KPI you're looking to adjust there, would it be biting off too much? Maybe you can take your SDR function and have them focus on one KPI, and then your CS team might be focusing on different and be able to move 2 of those at a time? Or is that taking off too much and you really think you should have everyone on the same page?
I do think you can do a different initiative per team, right? So, and some of that is also executive bandwidth and such, right? And I think you already talked to like, hey, if you have like an exec over each of those functions and they're distinct teams and they have distinct things they need to address, you can definitely run those indeed in parallel. Claire?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie and Dominique, for that. I just to be really, really quick, I think the reason that I was asking around timeline is because when we separated out our program, we had immediate impacts, the kind of sprints that you were talking through. So kind of where we would be able to get closer to best practice metrics, but then we also had revenue targets, kind of mid to long-term expectations, so that we could kind of have a look at what the LTV would look like as we're kind of going forward. For those kinds of programs, is that where you would kind of switch it over into from a sprint and then have a look at kind of like that longer term program that you might run as a change management piece? I think that's the piece for me, because not all of the things that we were doing inside of specific go-to-market squad that I'm talking about were stuff that you could change inside of a sprint.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I think that's actually, let me make this last point before we sign off. And since we had so much good discussion, maybe it doesn't enough time to do it justice, but there's a lot of things that could go wrong, right? And I think many of these, I'll just flip through it, these objections or mistakes to avoid have already been raised. But I think there is sort of a theme here that is emerging and that I think you're touching on that I do want to emphasize. It's indeed not only about sprints. Before you can do your first sprint, you have to change mindset. So this idea, right, that and some of these objections you saw, like people are not bought into one thing at a time. People are not really having a customer-centric mindset. We don't have a unified customer journey. We don't have a common definition of what good looks like or what the data says. So indeed, I would say recommendation number 1 on the change management is that people indeed could jump into sprints too quickly without doing the groundwork. And so Charlie mentioned this coalition of the willing, right? You really do have to start with, sort of those executives and some of those, again, I call them here mindset workshops, right? So to get people in the right mindset before you can start changing behavior or skills, which is what the sprints are targeted at, right? So that's, I would say, prep work there to the left. Another recommendation is that you have technology that reinforces this. So lots of ways to bake these. So it's not just dependent on people and training and coaching, but also turn-by-turn directions, things that could live in your Salesforce or other systems. So again, that they're more enduring, I would say, and sticky. And then, so these are all the things sort of that you surround sprints with that are very important, with the top 3 being that coalition of the willing, the mindset change throughout the organization. The frontline managers, I sort of glossed over that, but you see it there, train the trainer, frontline manager trainers, make sure that there's a fundamental capability of coaching, capable, and then technology. And all of those are, sort of bigger, more structural things that do need to be in place to surround your sprints and to be successful with sprints. And even then, there are some things that don't fit in a month that might be, taking up 3 sprints. But again, go to your development team, who indeed has a lot of experience translating waterfall into lean, right? And that's sometimes true for feature development as well, that you're doing some big overhaul in your product that doesn't fit in the usual sprint that they define. And so it's similar here as well. But I think that analogy is helpful because it also, again, if you think back of your development team going from waterfall to sprints or to agile, that did not happen overnight, right? That really is a pretty fundamental shift. And I think that's something that we've, I think learned the hard way, doing these projects with you all, that it's, it'll take some time. Now, obviously, we're here to help. I know many of you have mentioned you want to continue the discussion. I think in my email, I do run some peer groups and some more focus groups like this. So drop me a note, Dominique at Winning by Design or Sari at Winning by Design, if you're interested to participate in these peer groups that talk about Impact Office and go-to-market strategy and operations. Also, in general, if you want to stay involved with Winning by Design, sign up for our newsletter where we publish whenever we do these surveys or other findings. We publish that by signing up for the newsletter. If you want help convincing your management team, right, these mindset workshops, we could help you facilitate those. Again, we're always very open source. If you can do this yourself, great, but we're also here to help both. But we always do it with you, right? We're trying to eventually make you as self-sufficient as possible and co-create. But two areas where other customers have benefited from our help would be one, just to get that alignment up front through executive alignment workshops, or just to do some staff augmentation and rent a person almost from Winning by Design temporarily to help you implement and get on the right cadence with the Impact Office as well. So if you're interested in any of those, feel free to obviously reach out to Sari or myself, and then hopefully we can continue the discussion.